is the most backward system I've ever seen in any civilized country.
$45 for one movie, or you're getting to see 2 or 3 movies for that?
That's someone very obscene to the woman, showing them middle finger, using the 4-letter word.
Well, helter smelter. Aliud Trent has gotten the all clear to set up shop in La Brea. I have a lot to say about that, but first, no one really acted with surprise when the EMA announced that it had granted a certificate of environmental clearance, and if you did, well, then you're a moron. But don't feel too bad. That condition is far more common in this country than most would care to admit. The EMA boss says he is satisfied after a year of ruminating on the application. So the rubber stamp is not a shocker. And even if the certificate was not granted, do you think this government would have given a shit? Let me take you back to Taruba, my friends. You may recall that the Taruba project was going full steam ahead and there was no CEC.
A couple months ago, the Environmental Management Authority reportedly issued a notice of violation and an administrative order to UDCOT, the contractor responsible for the building of the stadium.
The authority has already done this with 2 private sector corporation. Angostura has been fined, and so has Answer McCall, because they went ahead with their things before getting the proper clearance certificates. And the law applies to every developer, whether it is a state enterprise or a private sector enterprise. And it weakens the authority, because now it means then that anyone developing will say, well, listen, the UDCOT has got away with it. Why are you picking on me?
So Dr. Dave McIntosh could say what he wants. Manning on a trip in Africa crowed about building 3 smelters. The point of my having shown that news report is that regardless of what the EMA says or does, commitments to safeguard the environment in this country are not worth a pint of piss. Wendy Lien, who is an executive member of the COP, could not have made the point better.
Anti-smelter activist and deputy political leader of the Congress of the People, Wendy Lien, says she has no faith in the monitoring of the Aliud Trent aluminum smelter as proposed by the Environmental Management Authority. This comes one day after the EMA gave Aliud Trent the go-ahead for the building of a smelter at Union Estate, La Brea. The authority said that 27 compliance officers will monitor the impacts on human health, vegetation and wildlife. Lien says the country has no history of enforcement, so there is no trust in the process.
Residents are complaining of effluent coming out of manufacturing companies into the waterways and fouling the very air that they breathe, to the point where they have no comfort in their own home. Who manages that process? Not the same EMA? So are you going to tell me that they're going to operate differently because it's the smelter plant down there than what they should be doing for all of us right now? We don't have a history of enforcement.
And we're surrounded by examples of our inept approach to environmental protection. We just take it for granted. Let's see if you can guess where this video was recorded. If you said C, then you were very close. Oh, Mother Earth! The Pointe Pear River has been more oil than water for decades, and that watercourse in the Beetham, everyone knows, is so polluted you can walk across it. So who is the EMA kidding? The EMA should stick to what it does best, checking decibel levels outside of Alternative Concept 12, or whichever one it is now. I've visited La Brea on many occasions, and to describe it as a depressed community would be an understatement. It is a district in desperate need of employment. Of course, the question is, once the construction is complete, how many permanent jobs will actually go to unskilled workers in that community? The answer? None. Moving on. So Baz is off the hook, and quite naturally he wants his seat back. A credible return to the political platform would require a presence in Parliament, but the PNM is not having any of that.
Sir Kenneth Valley moved to have the House adjourned to a date to be fixed. The members then filed noisily out of the chamber. Speaking with reporters after the brief sitting, Mr. Pandey said today he planned to ask the Speaker what was his status of the House. The opposition said it came prepared to continue the debate as stated on the order paper, but was not allowed to do so. Pandey said the country's parliament is now a mockery. He said this is the worst parliament in the entire region.
It's a shame and a disgrace. We are such a wealthy country, and we are the worst parliament in the whole of the Caribbean, probably the Western Hemisphere. It's a shame, an absolute shame.
It's a mockery.
What are they afraid of? Why are they afraid of me? All I'll do is talk.
Pandey told reporters that the speaker had indicated to him that he would be allowed into the House, but not to speak. He said he cannot agree with this.
So he said, well, will you not speak for during this debate? And I said, I'm terribly sorry. No. He says, well, will you not speak for 2 days? I said, I do beg your pardon. I promise you only one thing. I will not speak for today, which was the first day. I said that after that, I am going to speak on the debate. He said nothing.
The opposition also accused the government of adjourning the House to deny Mr. Pandey the opportunity to speak. Meanwhile, the matter is said to have been sent to the court to decide on whether or not the former Prime Minister will be allowed to represent his constituency without facing an election.
So the explanation is that Mr. Pandey cannot be allowed to retake his seat because it was declared vacant in the last year of the life of Parliament. We ain't afraid, Pandey, is what Valley says. Yet it is adjournment after adjournment. Of course, they know that if they go on with the sitting, Mr. Pandey will be disruptive, he will be cautioned, he will rebel and proceed, of course, hoping to be physically removed from the House, while squander an opportunity to be crucified for the cause. In a post-cabinet news conference, the leader of government business in the House, Kenneth Valley, explained.
We have said quite clearly that we see Mr. Pandey's intention, that he's looking for an issue on which to fight his election campaign, this being an election year, and he's seeking a confrontation in the House, and therefore we're not going to give him any gift.
Mr. Valley went on to say that if this were not an election year, that things might have been different. Really? But you know, it is fortuitous that this should happen now, because hopefully we could see as a nation that the Parliament was never a forum for your interests to be represented. It has been exposed for what it really is, a backyard cockfight. A coliseum where political gladiators try to out-strategize each other, frustrate the legislative process, to undermine each other and generally waste time and money in what would otherwise be perfectly good housing for the indigents in Woodford Square and environs. Journalist Tony Fraser pressed this point at the news conference, and Mr. Valley, like a crab, backed himself deeper and deeper into that hole.
But obviously you're asking the wrong person that, huh? I mean, you know,
but why then did the government take a position that he shouldn't speak? Because in shutting down the Parliament...
the government is not taking a position that he ought not to speak. The Speaker has taken that position, all right? And given that the Speaker is taking that position, you know, the government's position is, but we know clearly what is going to happen, okay? And therefore, we are saying that really we don't want Mr. Pandey to come and disrupt the House and trying to find an election issue.
Mr. Valley, come on. As Shakespeare once said, you cannot A moment ago, you made it clear that your motivation was to deprive Mr. Pandey of political ammunition in the House in an election year. Now you're coming with talk about the Speaker is the boss?
Mr. Valley, isn't there a kind of difficulty, something that you're setting up by using the Parliament, however embarrassing it might turn out for the government, having Mr. Pandey carted away out of the Parliament, if he tries to speak? Isn't there a danger there by the government stopping the sitting of Parliament? You have no control over how long the court is going to take with this matter. It could be 3 months, it could be 3 weeks, it could be 6 months. And you've effectively stopped the people's business in the Parliament because it might cause some embarrassment to the government and give Mr. Pandey an election issue to fight.
Well, this is an election year. It might have been quite different if it were last year or year before, okay? But when you know clearly what the intent of a politician is, when you give him a gift, I mean, that cannot be in your best interest. Secondly, we would expect the courts, having regard to the seriousness of this issue, to deal with it rather quickly. Thirdly, the next issue on the order paper is the bill that we are debating is the Equal Opportunities Bill that the UNC has been clamoring for some time, you know, and therefore they know what they need to do if they want to have that bill debated in the House. You know, the government is continuing with its work, you know. It is not as though the government has stopped. As a matter of fact, to the extent that we don't have to go to the Parliament once or twice a week, we can do more work in the interest of the people.
The Parliament has no business about whether this is election year or not.
Who tell you that?
The Parliament.
What purpose the Parliament?
No, the Parliament is to pass
elections?
legislation and deal with it, not to conduct an election campaign for the ruling party.
Friend, I don't know where you're living, but understand, please, let me tell you, that the Parliament comprised persons, in the lower house especially, persons who are elected after an election. So to say that the Parliament has nothing to do with elections, you know, that is not
an election campaign. To conducting an election campaign.
But
very
again,
different.
Again, you're wrong, because every day we go to Parliament, the government puts forward its views with a view to condition the public's mind, and the opposition criticize that policy position and so on, with a view to condition the public's mind, with a view to the next election. That's the reality.
Please, the Speaker runs the House. Everyone knows that the Speaker is a political appointee and must toe the government line. The last Speaker who tried to run the House ended up with her locked up in her own house. Remember? We'll take a break. We'll be right back. We now exist in a global community, and for this reason I've decided to include an international segment. It helps me, I find, come to terms with the ridiculous nature of life in this country. With a perspective on the wider world, sometimes you can sit back and say, wow, it's not that bad here. For this purpose, I've scoured the intranet looking for the most outlandish stories I could find. So let's take a look. First, a Ukrainian woman was arrested after customs officers caught her trying to smuggle drugs inside a vibrator. Svetlana Ivanishka was asked to open her suitcases at Kiev airport after guards got a tip-off that a young woman on her flight from New Delhi was carrying drugs. They found a bag of hashish stuffed into the sex toy's battery compartment. A border police spokesman said she told us that she had put the drugs in a vibrator because she thought no one would ever think of touching it, let alone looking inside it. One security spokesman said she was obviously unaware of how thorough our officers are in their searches. Well, did you use it the night before, silly? In England, a council has apologized for banning lunatics, idiots, deaf and dumb people from standing for election. An election pack issued by Bournemouth Borough Council stated that lunatics and idiots and deaf and dumb persons were disqualified from standing. Matt Pitcher, Electoral Services Officer, said it was a mistake and that the terms were taken directly from election law dating back to 1766. The terminology used as part of our election pact to candidates was unfortunately taken directly from a piece of election law which dates back to 1766 but is still current today. Bournemouth Council treats all people fairly, whatever their sexual orientation, age, religious belief, disability, gender or race, and the council apologizes unreservedly for any offence which may have been caused. The information pack has been amended. Well, that is a relief. If that stipulation applied to elections here, and forget about the deaf bit, screening for candidates by political parties would be a half-hour affair. In the United States of America, a high school senior and his parents sued the Pinellas County School Board, claiming he was denied due process and should not have been transferred to another school for mooning a teacher. The complaint by Taylor Tillung and his mum and dad was filed in Pinellas Paso Circuit Court. In it, they claim the discipline taken against Tillung violated procedures contained in the school's district's Code of Student Conduct. Last February, Tillung, a senior at Palm Harbor University High School, mooned a drama teacher who would not let him attend a school lip-sync concert because she believed the auditorium was full. The complaint said he suddenly and without thinking about the consequences mooned her and added injury to insult by spreading his buttocks for an instant. He admitted to the act, thinking it was a childish joke, and did not intend any abuse or insult to the teacher, and later apologized to her verbally and in writing, the lawsuit stated. Because of the incident, he was transferred administratively from his high school to Clearwater High School, prevented from playing with the Palm Harbor varsity baseball team, and was not permitted to graduate with his former classmates. He and his parents claim he was denied due process because the school did not follow the disciplinary procedures in the Code of Student Conduct. They also say that there are 34 specific acts of student misconduct that could result in discipline, including suspension, reassignment, or expulsion, but mooning is not one of them. Well, I'm sure that shoving your dick in someone's face is not listed among the 34 acts, but common sense has to intervene somewhere here, regardless of age. A teacher in Canada may get her job back after a bizarre classroom incident. It is quite possible she'll end back in her old position, said Grant Bowers, a lawyer for the Toronto district. Maria Pantalone, a sister of Toronto's deputy mayor, was granted an absolute discharge on assault charges after a judge said she had already suffered enough. The charges stemmed from an incident on July 30th, 2006, in which police said Pantalone threw feces at a boy who was not one of her students, hitting him on the shoulder. The circumstances of the assault cannot be described due to a court publication ban designed to protect the identity of the feces-covered victim. The judge in the case, however, said that they were quite unique. "I couldn't take it anymore. It was total frustration," Pantalone testified. Once the school board completes its own investigation, she could return to previous duties. A Toronto school board policy document details rules for the school at which Pantalone was principal that include the need to show respect for yourself and others. Keep hands, feet and objects to yourself. Well, I would imagine that has now been amended to include keep your fecal matter to yourself as well. You may have noticed that nowhere in the article was it mentioned where she accessed the feces, whether she did like, say, the geriatric monkeys at our zoo, or did she prepare it the night before and bring it with her in anticipation of being annoyed by the target of her excrement. If the latter is true, then that constitutes premeditated feces flinging, and that is an entirely different prosecution. I want to focus for a bit on the state of the nation's roads. How many of you remember way back when Wendell Motley was the Minister of Finance and he announced during one budget presentation that the government was introducing a 5% tax to be paid at the gas pump? Do you remember that? This was meant to go towards a road improvement fund. Well, that money must have disappeared into some big Sawati's pocket to go towards his home improvement fund. I honestly cannot recall whatever became of this tax, but I do know what the legacy of that initiative is. Let me show you this. I was dropping a friend home the other night when I went down in this chasm. The jolt was powerful enough to tangle my testicles. I think my friend's ovaries were inverted as a result of the shock. I cannot be sure. Now, the small orange cones you're seeing here were not there before. No doubt they were placed there after 100 people turned up at the doors of the Port of Spain City Corporation with bills for dented rims, busted tires and destroyed ball joints. Even where road repairs being done, the entire road was graded, leaving behind concrete blocks in the middle of the road where service entrances are for the sewers and whatnot. It is so kind of them to leave behind this unmarked obstruction so that you can have the pleasure of gutting your vehicle while you're driving through the city. Let's go back to a bit of news which stuck in my craw. Public servants were granted yet another 15% increase in salary. I say another because they were granted 15% when the PNM first came into power. I hope you will remember that. That is 30% in 5 years. Some people work for their entire lives without ever seeing that kind of advancement. The operative word here is work. I want you to listen carefully to what the junior finance minister had to say in announcing the increase.
Even as government moves to increase the salaries of public servants at a cost in excess of $880 million over a 3-year period, there is concern about the level of productivity in the sector. Junior Minister of Finance Conrad Enel said today the low productivity of public servants is a big problem and the country cannot move forward in its current state.
The way in which we measure productivity now leaves a lot to be desired, and there's a lot of work being done to come up with a system that allows us to reward those who are doing well, but at the same time allows us to take action against those who are falling short in their particular delivery program. In all the negotiations that we're doing, it is our intention to make sure that the notion of the market in trying to carry out this particular program.
He explained that traditionally the public service operated as a policy administration, but now it is expected to deliver a specific service in a specific time, like the private sector. He says this is not as easily accomplished in the public service, and the current exercise is to get managers and employees to work for set goals and get results.
In recognition that it exists, we are doing things to try to deal with it. It is long, but we recognize that there's an issue. And if you told me that you went into any government service and you were extremely happy with what you got after waiting for an hour, I would be very surprised. What we're seeking to do is to reduce that and to make that operate differently because we think people have different expectations.
Negotiations between the CPO and the PSA saw an agreement for a 15% increase for public servants. NL says the challenges lie in the retention of good people, with an expectation that terms and conditions should improve. Government, he says, has taken two approaches to maintaining the level of expertise: job evaluations and interim payments on the selected skills. He says the job evaluation exercise was halted because the PSA said the guide chart system to determine the value of the job was inappropriate. He says as a result of this, the problem remained. NL stressed that as the economy is expanding, there are more challenges in the delivery of quality service.
People who are involved in the delivery that will make it happen, which is why, for example, the government has taken the view that it must put its people in an environment that can allow them to give and to deliver the best service available, and that's why we have the government campus and some of those infrastructure projects. It is intended simply to supplement what we do here with the salary side, with a working environment that is conducive to the objective that we have.
You hear that? Now that you're getting a salary increase, we expect you to perform. Can you believe that? So what about the rest of us who break our asses for years, work long hours hoping for a measly $500 increase after 10 years on the job, and at the end of the day, we pay tax, which goes to pay the salaries of those very public servants. And when we go to the licensing department, we're treated like dogs. Either the computers are not working, or the staff aren't working, or both. Come back tomorrow. And then you have to call in sick or beg for another day off to go back to the licensing department to waste your life away. Yes, so they're being paid more. Why the hell would they have to work harder? Personal experience at the Board of Inland Revenue. I was in line at the Port of Spain office, and I can tell you spending time in the tax office is 10 times worse than riding a bike, slipping out of the pedals and crashing down on the crossbar. I'd rather have my fingernails pulled out with a heated birdbeak pliers than have to bear going to the Board of Inland Revenue again. Anyway, I was in line for about 30 minutes. It meandered all the way out to the street. When I finally got to the head of the line, the jackass behind the counter gave me a stupid grin and put a next window sign on the counter and took off. It was 10 o'clock in the morning. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. This is a segment called Conversations with Tanti from Central. This is a Gael viewer who calls from time to time just to chat. In a very long conversation with her, I found there were remarkable similarities between her views and mine, so I thought it might be interesting to share such a conversation with you.
That is it. That is all you have to do. But then they will get vexed when they say, oh, an eviction, this and eviction. You know what to buy, and you choose what you want to, and you buy that, and you budget for that. Yes, I know the things are expensive. You can't tell me that. Before, I would not have said anything. But now the position I'm in, I could understand how some people this feeling, but you have a choice. Nobody is complaining about the sneakers is $1,000. They're not complaining about the $100. I had 13 and they go and they're buying it. All the whiskey is being sold out Christmas time and for the holidays, and the rum could go up till when? Okay, I stopped smoking not because, well, I'm all right, because of my health, if you want to say that, but because of the price. So I made a choice. But I'm not going to pay X amount for that. You understand what I'm saying? I really don't know. I really don't know. You see, they want to go to be seen too. But you see, the scripture talk about doing things we stuff. All right. They want people to know they're eating yam and fig. You understand? So what they will do, they will put that down on the bottom, cover it over, and put the chicken on top. Hypocrisy. Now you're going in the Hilton and eating pong breadfruit.
but nothing is wrong with eating those things, and they're supposed to be healthy for you.
No, what I'm saying is, now you're going in Hilton and you're doing it.
Yeah, true.
That's what I'm saying. And you're eating, telling you about green fig, mayonnaise, salad, but like when you have potato salad, you have green fig salad. The home economists and they are telling you that. But we know about that long time. Boil it and you're substituting it, and you're substituting cassava to make the salad instead of the potato when you can't afford the potato. We know about corridos and curry fig. But they won't tell you that. But now you're going in there and you're getting caloric as a dip and this and that. When we usually buy a cent of that, 5 you're getting for a cent. Yeah, because they're not buying sensibly. And let me tell you again, it's the poor persons. Do you know the rich people? taking the time and checking. I remember some years back, Hugh Backshad was on a program late and on remember issues and ideas.
Yes.
He shops around. He shops around. The rich people shops around. Elias or some of them that have a clothing. Some years back, he was talking about it. I could call his name on the TV. And he said his wife changes her curtain once a year and they have clothes selling in the store. Want to have the most expensive thing. And I have rich family and rich friends. And do you know there's even someone that's coming to want us to look for lace $5 a yard?
And this is another thing. When I started my career, I worked for the first 10 years of my life. And I took taxi. I didn't have a car. Everybody has a car nowadays.
They see that. They only see Paolo, the Coco Payol, or the French Creole boy now. You know? That's all what they see. Remember they tell Trini at time, go back where you come from? Then yes, I only had to spend $150 to go down there. They didn't know the Trini what used to have to go and work lunchtime in his father's hardware store to pick up the shavings and take up the wood, and on evening he have to work on the holidays. Not seeing that. They see the big shops bad. They don't know when he started, whosoever it was as a floor walker, and he does of Stevens and Dodds and Fogarty's and all those things. So now that the children have something, they put aside for the bloody children. All right, listen to me. I might be deviating to the people who are hearing. They might figure, you know, you speaking one thing and I'm good deviating, but everything comes back to what you're saying. Yes, I know that is a sore point, but when that thing started up, it is better you give them that and they do something for it than the social. Remember in America with the social welfare business?
Yes.
When Clinton get fed up and he cut down some of them, they were annoyed. But having the babies and making the children not doing anything. Here at least you're getting something done. Listen to me, I know about what annoyed. But having the babies and making the children not doing anything. Here at least you're getting something done. Listen to me, I know about what I'm speaking. When it first started with the special wolf, ask the Father Jerry Pantin how it started. He will tell you about that with Suvol. Okay, but leave the politics out of it. But when it got so big, I think, well, the government had to come in and they start to employ people in special work. Then it started people with qualification. Do you know there are girls with 8 O levels and 5 and 6 and 7 O levels working at Kentucky? Do you know there are people with the CPEP with 6 and 7 O levels? Remember some years back in San Fernando, there was a girl working with the garbage truck with 8 O levels, 2 years. And when the public get to know some big boss will come and took her and give her employment, there are people there with qualification. At least they're doing something. You see, what you're seeing is when they finish working, just like long time with the dude, you see people 12 o'clock and they walking, they already went and cut their task. All right, task is equivalent to when you used to go in the cane field long time.
Right.
4 o'clock you go, and the earlier you go, you cut the task faster. Some people like to work with the early morning, not the hot sun. So when you finish, sometimes you have to remain there for the overseer. So people will see you. So it's the same thing with this. They finish and people passing now going and say, look at them, they're lazy. But they already do what they have to do. But they have to remain there for they have to come to the comments. Remember I told you I was watching the Black History on the BET cable?
Right.
So the same thing and saying how the white man put the liquor store in the corner, each of the corners.
Right.
One of the black brothers say, yes, my mother and grandmother was living in one of those corners, but they never bought the liquor. All about choices. You don't have to buy it. And if you don't buy it, the supply will be more than the demand and they would be out of business. So instead of buy something and go on the highway, how them people selling things on the highway.
Yeah.
Watchman failed his exams twice, his common entrance. Today he's a big time lawyer. There are plenty of children who go to the junior sec and senior sec school and today they're in position. Don't watch the 5 who busted the windscreen and punctured the tire and set in fire the schools. They don't want to learn. Other schools have children who come out from single parent and who poor too. They behave in themselves. Why are you not hearing that in those schools?
Next, we tackle the issue of race. That's next week. Why is it that we call a Chinese a Chinese? Has anyone ever bothered to ask if it bothers them? All Syrians involved in drugs. Do people say that simply out of envy? And why did I almost get the shit beat out of me when a maxi taxi tout shouted out to me, red man, we going in Tong. And I responded, no thanks, black man.
Going to the licensing office at Rice Road in Port Spain is the most backward system I've ever seen in any civilized country.
$45 for one movie, or you're getting to see 2 or 3 movies for that?
That's what. Very obscene to the women, showing them middle finger, using the 4-letter word.